bushings for the CTS-V. We're going to go step-by-step process on how to actually take apart these bushings this way that you don't have trouble with your car as I have with mine. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into it. So the first thing you need to do is you need to make sure that you take the wheel and tire off once you get it on the lift. Make sure that the car is secure. Then we're going to go into and the first thing is we're going to grab a 10mm wrench and we're going to take off the stabilizer arm for the magnetic ride suspension. So we're going to jump right into it and then we'll go from there. Alright, so this is the 10mm bolt that we were talking about right here for the stabilizer arm for the magnetic ride suspension. So what we're going to do is we're going to take it off right here. So you're going to take your 10mm wrench. Alright, you're just going to, it's a self-tapping screw going up to the top of the arm. So at first it's going to be really tough to get. Make sure you do obviously righty tighty lefty loosey, and then we're going to go through and take it off. Alright, so the next process is we're going to grab our 18mm wrench and we're going to grab our 5 for the Allen key. What you want to do is this Allen key, there's an Allen key hole right inside of the top of this nut right here, and you want to take your 18mm and come across and get across the top of it. This way you have good access to it. You're going to come across and then you take the actual A-line off. And what this is doing is it's releasing the ball joint off the top of the spindle. And once it comes off, it should drop. Alright, then you can move your spindle however you need to do the next process, which is going to be taking these 2 bolts right here off of the actual magnetic strut itself. So we're going to go ahead and take these 2 bolts out, and then we're going to get done with these 2 bolts, and we're going to start moving our way up to the top. With the actual strut and everything out of the way, what we're going to do is we're going to come up here to the top, we're going to lower the car down, we're going to start going through and getting these bolts off for the top of the strut. The biggest thing is you want to make sure that the strut bar is completely off. So you want to undo the 2 top screws over here on that side so that we can actually take the strut off. Once we get the strut bar off, then we can start working the top of the spindle, getting these nuts and stuff off this top hat to drop the spring and the top hat. As you can tell, we got the strut bar off. What we're going to do now is we're going to actually take this bolt off, this bolt, this bolt. This bolt is completely out already, and then there's a bolt back here in the very back that you have to take the whole spindle out. Now, just know that whenever you take these bolts out, they're 18mm. Make sure that whatever bolt you have last, normally I keep this one as the last one, so that when the actual spindle drops, I can take my other hand and go underneath the car and actually grab the strut as it's coming down. So make sure that you actually have a good grip on this spindle before you actually take this last bolt out. Alright, so I'm going to take this last bolt off right here. Make sure that you have a good grip of the actual spindle itself. Set your impact down. And then what you're going to do is you're going to grab it and you're going to move the spindle out of the way. Make sure whenever you actually go to take it out of the car, that you don't scratch your car as it comes out. And that is your spindle. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace this bushing and this bushing right here off of the AM. Alright, with your spring compressors on, alright, you're going to go ahead and start cinching them down. Make sure you evenly on both sides. So now what you see is the actual spindle and the spring itself is kind of loose from the actual top hat. So with that, just know that this spring right here has a lot of tension on it. So make sure that you don't just manhandle it, just throw it anywhere you want to, because what's going to happen is if these spring compressors come off, there's a lot of energy that's going to be forced outward, and you don't want to be a part of that. So just make sure that whenever you're actually working anytime with these spring compressors, that you aren't sitting here trying to manhandle it. So what we're going to do is now we're going to take this nut, which is the actual magnetic ride sensor. We're going to take it off. So make sure that whenever you take it off, you don't just strip it off. Alright. So one little pull just comes completely off like that. Alright, and then right now there is another nut right in here. And what you're going to do is you're going to take a thin wall 18mm socket. And you're gonna stick the thin wall 18mm socket, and you're gonna use the impact to actually impact that completely out. All right, so remember, the top hat, you can't manhandle the spring, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna impact it out, and this is how you do it. All right, so now the nut's completely out. Move it off to the side, and now make sure that you're not behind the spring. Make sure you move off to the side of the spring, so I'm gonna move off to the side here. And once we move off to the side, this way we're away from the spring, we're gonna take and pull the top hat completely off of it. And we're gonna leave the spring and everything assembled here, and we're gonna take this over here to the bench vise and start taking all of these actual nuts and bolts off to start getting to the bushings. We have it on the vise here now. I put it on the actual A-arm itself. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take an 18mm wrench and my impact, which has an 18mm socket on it, and we're gonna actually take these nuts and bolts off right here, and then we're gonna actually take the top hat off. All right, so here's what's gonna happen. Take the bolts out. Okay, and the top hat comes off. All right, so with the top hat completely off, we're gonna look in here, and you see this is the reason why we need to actually replace it, because Cadillac CTS-Vs have a tendency to have these bushings right here go out and they rip pretty easily, especially if you're doing track days and stuff like that. They can actually come apart. So this is the reason why you need to actually replace these with polyurethane or whatever type of bushings you want. For your bushing that you have on the actual CTS-V, there is a lip that's considered part of the actual bushing itself. So when you actually get done with this, you need to punch it completely out with that lip. It's a metal surface. It's an actual aluminum ring that goes around this bushing. So when you push it out, make sure you press that actual lip out with it, and I'll show you exactly how that's done here in a few minutes. My press that I have right now is not currently working, so what I'm going to use is I'm going to use a bench vise, which is probably what y'all are going to mostly use anyway whenever you're actually doing this type of install. So what I did is I have a big enough circular thing for the bushing to actually get pushed through. So what you want to do is this lip that's on this side, you want to put that piece to go all the way around it so it actually pushes it out. I have a 34 socket, and what it's going to do is it's going to push that ring that is on the outer edge inside of this socket with the bushing itself. So we're going to go ahead and tighten this up, and then we'll see the actual bushing push out, and then we'll work on this side as well. All right, going through and pushing it. And what you're going to do is I had to have a little bit more leverage, so I'm sitting here watching this socket push the actual bushing inside with it. All right, so I'm getting more leverage to actually push the bushing out. The more and more I keep going, the easier and easier it becomes to actually get that bushing out, and it should go here in a few seconds. And there's your bushing. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to back this out, and I'm going to actually show you what it looks like. All right, so this is the inside of the actual socket itself. I just had this laying around the shop. This is your actual bushing. So there's a metal sleeve, aluminum sleeve that comes out with it. Make sure that you do take this aluminum sleeve out, because if you don't and you go to put in the new bushings will bulge out too much and will not actually seat on top of the actual top hat itself. So make sure that this whole entire piece comes out as one unit. So we're going to go ahead and start doing the second one, and we're going to go ahead and start pushing it. This is what you have. The inside of the mating surface is a lot easier and aluminum, so you can actually lubricate this, and we'll actually lubricate this with the supplied stuff that they come with. Make sure that you actually lubricate these very well so that you don't have any type of squeaking noise or anything like that when you're driving. All right, so with the A-arm on the actual vise, what we're going to do is the supplied lube that they gave me for Creative Steel, we're going to go ahead and stick our finger in here and grab some of this lubrication. And then what we're going to do is we're going to lubricate the inside of this ring in here with this jelly so that it actually is able to slide in pretty well with this polyurethane bushing. Alright, so with that being done, you're going to grab your polyurethane bushing. We're going to lubricate the outside of this bushing itself. Alright, make sure that you're actually pretty generous with this stuff so that you have no issues actually sliding the bushing in, and as well as going to stop it from actually squeaking. And then we're going to actually get this facing the lip part on the outside of the actual AR. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to head and take it here and then press it in. And as you can tell, it's pretty easy to push in. If you have any type of issues with this going in, just know that you're probably doing something wrong, because you see how easy that was actually to slide in inside of it. So just make sure that you keep this pretty well lubricated for it to actually go in. So we're going to finish this up. I'm going to get the center section put in here in a second, and then we'll go from there. Alright, so what we're doing is we're lubricating the actual flange itself, going through and being pretty generous with it as well. Alright, once we get done lubricating the actual flange, we're going to go in here and lubricate this hole with the polyurethane bushing. Alright, and then we should be able to actually just slide it in slightly. If you can't slide it in, don't be too concerned, because it's sort of a pain to actually put in. But there we go. Start sliding in. I'm going to push it all the way across. Alright, if you can't get it across, what you're going to do is you're going to take it off the vise right here and use it as leverage. Alright, don't force it, but just slide it. Let it glide. Alright, it should just glide straight in. Alright, once it gets to the stopping point, just let off of it. Alright, you want to make sure that this is actually flush. So what I'm going to do is I grab a one of the actual bolts itself, alright, and put it in. And we're going to bring it across. I'm going to slide the bolt to where it pushes that flange a little bit more. Alright. Alright, now it's flush. What we're going to do is we're going to finish the install on the other side. Once we finish the install on this side, we're going to move over to our top hat, which is right here, and we're going to install on the side of the top hat. So what we're going to do is we got some lube here. We're going to lube the outside of this actual ring up so that it has some kind of lubrication. Then we're going to go to the inside as well and lubricate the inside of this ring. Alright, so what this is going to do is this is going to keep it from squeaking on your top hat. What this is going to do is you have a big flange here. Alright, so once you set this off into the actual top hat, alright, you set it off into the top hat, you're going to slide the ring in there. Alright, and make sure that your fittings that you have go to the inside where the spring is. Alright, the reason being is because you have to have some kind of way of lubricating this rod that goes through, and the only way to do that is to actually have it go through the springs, because if you have it go the opposite direction, you're not going to be able to get to it. Okay, so make sure that the bolt goes inside to outside, and also make sure that the grade 8 washer that they have supplied with the actual kit is on the actual top of the bolt itself here. Alright, so now it goes through. It's going to come out the other side. Alright, so now it goes all the way through, and then you can actually work with the other side, slide it in, and get this one in as well. Alright, it seems a lot easier. Alright, make sure your fittings are facing towards the outside of the actual car when you go to put it in. So now we're going to actually bolt this up, and then we're going to get the top hat put back on this ring. So with our 18mm and our 19mm, the 19mm is going to be the one that they supplied with the actual fitting itself. So that's going to go there. and then the 18 is going to be the nut that you originally had. So you're replacing the bolt from the old system with their bolt that they came with, and then you're actually taking the nut that you used to begin with and tighten it up. When I say tightening it up, I mean don't actually tighten it to the point where you can't move this A-arm. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen it back up a little bit more before we actually get it back on the car. The reason being is because you do not want to tighten this up, get it put into the car, and then have these bushings having to sit there and bind against each other. So you want to have this a little loose before you put it back in the car, then we'll tighten it up once we get into the car. Before you actually go to install this, if this had fell or any type of situation where you're trying to figure out exactly what goes on with this stuff, all right, so you have the top hat with all of the stuff that goes with it. All right, so, but you have these actual plastic washer and you have this metal washer. All right, so make sure that once you actually go to install this, if this had fell, make sure it goes back into the actual top hat itself. What you're gonna do is the bottom portion of this is going to go down and towards the spring, the bottom of the spring. So you're gonna slide that in, all right? So make sure that that is completely in and seated, all right? And then you have this actual washer is black, okay? It has an inner lip inside of it, all right? That inner lip has the face down. So this whole flat surface right here is mating to the actual surface of the strut itself. So it's gonna go down, all right? Notice flange inside, down, all right? And it's gonna go inside of this plastic washer right here itself. All right, now remember I said do not manhandle the actual spring, all right? So I'm not manhandling it, I'm pretty much sliding it across. This is going to fall down on top of the thing, and then we're going to put the top hat on top of here and bolt it back down. In order for your top hat to go on, all right, there's only one way that the spring actually goes back into the car. If you notice right here, this section right here is the actual back of the spring. So this is actually going to go towards the inside of the car. All right, this, make sure that everything is lined up perfectly for your actual top hat to go back on. All right, so once your top hat goes back on, it should just slide right back into the hole it came out of. All right, again, not manhandling anything, just making sure it just seats right in there correctly. We're gonna go back and take our 18mm nut and screw it back in. All right, and then we're gonna take our 18mm socket and our impact, and we're gonna impact this completely back in. Once we get it completely impacted back in, then we'll go ahead and take the spring compressors back off. All right, with the nut in place, all right, we're gonna put our magnetic ride sensor back on, all right, and then we're gonna get our 18mm wrench, and we're gonna actually wrench it back down. Make sure that when you go to wrench it down, make sure you use the torque spec. Me, personally, I don't really go by the torque spec. I just make sure that I don't go through and strip it, so I just put it in really good and tight. And then we'll go through and actually release these spring compressors. Go ahead and take the spring compressor off. Take them off on both. Make sure when you take them off, it's equally. All right. Once the spring compressor's off, then we'll go ahead and take it off and start putting our spring and strut assembly back into the car. All right, with the strut and assembly, go ahead and start putting it back in the same way you took it back out. All right, you slide it in, just make sure you don't scratch the car. Once you get it back up into place, all right, then you have 2 dowel pins that need to go in at the top. They're plastic, so we're gonna go up to the top and we're gonna actually take the 18mm bolt that we took out. The same way we put it back in, or the same way we took it back out, the same way we're gonna put it back in. So make sure you line it back up with the dowel pins, and slide it into place. All right. Now you're gonna take your nut or your bolt and screw it back in. All right. It doesn't have to be 100% back in before you actually go ahead and start putting another one back in with it. All right. So just know that these two, one has to have a stud, which is the inside towards the motor, has to have the stud. So this is the one that has a stud. So make sure that when we get the top hat put back completely up with all the other bolts in it, we put this one here and we move this one here. All right. We'll go all the way around. We'll go ahead and tighten these up to torque, and we'll go from there. All right, so with the actual top hat up, now we take this bolt out and move it off to another one, to this hole. Tighten it down. We put our stud in. All right, tighten that down. And now we're going to put the back one in with the computer sets. And I'm going to go ahead and run my finger all the way down to lock it in place. Once it's locked in place, then I'll grab an 18mm wrench and wrench that down. The strut and assembly in, we're going to go ahead and start taking and putting these the 13mm bolts back in that holds the actual strut assembly. All right, so if you can't see it, I'm going to post the pictures here in the link so you can actually see it. But this is the actual bolt and the bolt on this side as well. So we're going to go ahead and tighten these two down to get the spindle back up. All right, with your spindle and assembly already back in, we're going to take and put this 18mm nut back on, and we're going to take and use our 5 for the actual ball joint itself. We're going to take the 18 and put it there, which is right here, right across. All right, now we're going to tighten it up. See, that's the reason why you want to have the Allen wrench, so it doesn't spin out your hands. And it keeps the ball joint locked in place. All right, with it tightened, go ahead and tighten it down to torque specs. All right, and then we're going to go back, and you remember the 19 and 18 on the actual top pad itself, the one that has the fittings. We're going to go through and we're going to tighten these two up so that it can't flex anymore unless it's with the actual nut and washer itself. Now that we got everything pretty much all back together, we're going to take and put our magnetic ride control self-tapping screw back in. Make sure you don't cross thread this when you go to put it back in. So make sure you do it finger tight as far as you can, and then you can cinch it down with your 10mm bolt. All right, once you get it cinched down, that would conclude the actual top portion of this kit. We will continue on another day to actually finish out the bottom due to the fact that I need a press for the bottom ball joints, and then I can get the bottom bushings out to put in the new hardware that I have. What we're gonna do is, I already bought new ball joints, so I'm waiting on them to come in, but we're gonna go ahead and you're gonna have to buy new ball joints, or unless you can actually find a way to get these ball joints out without having to actually worry about breaking them or ripping them. But with that being said, this is a 21mm bolt. This 21mm bolt needs to be impacted off, then screwed back on slightly so that you actually don't mess up any of the threads or anything like that, that you can actually use this bolt. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take a pickle fork. The pickle fork is gonna go slide inside of the actual ball joint itself. You're gonna hammer it in. With that, you're also gonna take a propane torch, and you're gonna torch the bottom of this to actually get it as hot as you can while you're actually hitting the pickle fork in. Once you hit the pickle fork in, and this is hot enough, you'll actually see the ball joint start to separate from the inside of the actual knuckle, and then you can just pull it straight up and get it out of the actual hole. We're not gonna take it out actually right now until we actually get done with these bushing, these bolts to actually take down the bushings. Now, if you don't plan on having your car aligned or anything like that before you actually go to do this, I highly suggest that you do get it aligned, but if you don't get it aligned, then you're gonna have to make sure that you mark where the nut and bolt is in circumference of where the bushing is going to be, so that you don't mess up your alignment at all. This is how you actually adjust your camber and caster is through this arm with these two bolts right here. So with that being said, we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna take these nuts and bolts off right here for the ball joint, and then I'm gonna go ahead and take these bolts and nuts off to actually lower the whole A-line. So we're gonna take 21 millimeter wrench and 21 millimeter ratchet, and we're just gonna take them off. We'll get these nuts and bolts off, and then we'll lower the whole entire lower control arm. With that being said, the two bolts that we put on for the strut itself early in the video, which I'll take pictures and link back to, the ones that you need to take back off in order for this lower control arm to actually come on. So you got your 24 millimeter bolt in the back, so give me the 24 millimeter wrenches up in here, and then we'll take these bolts off. All right, with the same setup, we're going to actually take the 34 with the actual same thing that we did earlier, and we're just going to push the ball joint out. Pull it out. You'll be able to see the bushing is close to being out. So with that being said, I want to take your lower control arm, go ahead and tighten it down on the right. Just push it the rest of the way out. And now you have a clean mating surface for your new bushing on this side. Now we're going to continue to go on, and we're going to take this bushing out at the bottom, and then we'll continue from there. With the bushings out, the aluminum, just make sure you have the aluminum ring out with the actual bushing itself. On the big one and then the small one, obviously what I would do is I would cut this rubber that's around one side of it, and then you'd be able to push it out of your actual hole for the bushing to come out. So with that being said, treated steel, they come with a double washer. Make sure this double washer, you do not take it apart because it is part of the kit. It comes together, it's glued together. Do not take it apart. You have your flat washer, then you have your other flat washer on the other side, as well as the other double washer. So with that being said, you take all of this stuff apart, all the way down to the actual bushing itself. All right, and it's a split bushing. It's a split bushing, so you just take it apart, and then you just take one end and put it on the other side, and then take the center section out. All right, so like any of the other ones, you want to make sure that you lube this up really well, so you don't have any squeaks. Go around on the inside. Make sure you're generous with it. All right, and what I do is I like to rub on the outside as well for the mating surface on both sides. All right, and then the polyurethane bushing itself, make sure that you have lubrication on the bushing around on the inside as well. All right, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you sandwich the top one in, and then sandwich the bottom one in. All right, so now you have your polyurethane bushing in. Now you want to get the center section. Make sure that you lubricate both the inside and the actual center section itself. All right, and with that being said, you just go in, take and push the center section in. Once it gets in, you want to make sure that you have a clamp that you can actually take on either side and clamp this down, and it'll do the same thing that you did with the original top bushing. It would just sandwich in between the two, so just make sure that it's flush on both sides. Now that we have the bottom in, we're going to actually start working on the top now. So like I said, make sure you're generous, make sure you lube this one up as well inside, and then make sure that the polyurethane bushing is lubed up as well. All right, I'm going to take the top. There it goes. And we'll get this one lubed up, and then we'll push it from the bottom. Alright, so that one's in, and that one's in. Alright, so now take and lube the inside of the hole where the flange goes. Get the flange lubricated. Slide the flange in. There it goes. What we're gonna do is I'm gonna grab the C-clamp that I have here, and we're going to C-clamp it in. All right, now that we have the ball joint in right here, what we're gonna do is we're going to maneuver this around to actually get it to where it sits inside the actual bracket hole. All right, what we're gonna do is we're gonna slide one of the washers on the inside right here, and we're gonna slide another washer on the outside here so that the pin can go through. Make sure that the fittings are towards the outside of either side of the car. So one goes towards the back, one goes to the front on this side. So we're gonna get these installed and then we'll go from there.